Your soulmate screamed their love for you in front of everyone. You won't believe what happened. My beloved child. The room was already tense when your soulmate suddenly stood up, but no one expected the words that came next. Their hands were shaking. Their face had gone pale. Someone nearby quietly told them to sit down, yet they refused. Then, in front of everyone, they looked toward the people who had questioned their feelings for you and screamed, "I love them." The entire room went silent. Not an uncomfortable silence, a stunned one. Because your soulmate had spent so long hiding what they felt that even the people closest to them believed they would never admit it publicly. But something had happened only minutes earlier that pushed them beyond fear. And strangely, it wasn't jealousy that triggered this confession. It was something someone said about you when they thought your soulmate would stay quiet. What could possibly have been powerful enough to make them risk everything in one unforgettable moment? At first, your soulmate tried to control themselves. They listened while someone questioned whether you truly mattered to them. Another person suggested they should simply forget you and move forward as if the connection had meant nothing. Your soulmate kept staring at the floor, gripping their hands together, saying almost nothing. But then one sentence changed their expression completely. Someone claimed that if your soulmate genuinely cared about you, they would have proven it by now. That accusation hit a place they had been protecting for months. Suddenly, every memory of you came rushing back, the conversations they replayed when nobody was around, the moments they almost contacted you, and the nights they wondered whether they had already waited too long. Then they lifted their head. Their eyes were filled with emotion, and before anyone could interrupt, they finally said what they had been terrified to admit. But the confession itself wasn't what shocked everyone most. Don't skip, because what happened immediately afterward exposed something your soulmate never knew. One person in that room didn't look surprised at all. While everyone else stared at your soulmate, this person remained completely still, almost as if they had been waiting for the confession. Your soulmate noticed. "Why are you looking at me like that?" they asked. For several seconds, the person said nothing. Then they revealed that you had been discussed before, more than once, and certain things had been deliberately kept from your soulmate because people feared how strongly they would react. Suddenly, their public declaration of love became something much bigger than an emotional outburst. Your soulmate demanded to know exactly what had been hidden. The atmosphere changed instantly. People who had been speaking confidently moments earlier began avoiding eye contact. And then one person finally admitted there was a reason your soulmate had been made to believe that loving you openly would create problems. Your soulmate stepped closer and asked the question nobody wanted to answer: "What did you do?" That was when someone across the room whispered a confession that made your soulmate realize the distance between you may never have been accidental. The confession came slowly, almost painfully. Someone finally admitted that months earlier, when your soulmate was beginning to realize how deeply they cared about you, a few people around them had quietly interfered. Nothing dramatic at first. Just carefully chosen words. Doubts planted at exactly the right moments. They told your soulmate you probably didn't feel the same way. They suggested that reaching out would only lead to rejection. And whenever your soulmate gathered enough courage to move toward you, another warning appeared. Standing there now, your soulmate suddenly understood why everything had felt so confusing. But one question immediately became impossible to ignore. Why had these people been so determined to keep the two of you apart? Your soulmate demanded an answer, and this time their voice wasn't trembling. One person confessed they had noticed something unusual from the beginning. Your soulmate changed whenever your name came up. Their entire expression softened. They defended you even when you weren't there. And the closer they seemed to becoming with you, the less control other people felt they had over their decisions. That was the real fear. Your soulmate wasn't being protected from you. They were being protected from becoming brave enough to choose you. The realization hit hard. For months, they had blamed themselves for hesitating, wondering whether their feelings were foolish. Now they were discovering that some of those fears had been carefully encouraged. Yet the biggest revelation was still waiting, because someone in that room knew something about you that your soulmate had never been told. Then a quiet voice came from the back of the room. "There's something else." Everyone turned. Your soulmate froze because the person speaking had always claimed to know almost nothing about you. But now they admitted they had witnessed something months ago, something involving you that completely contradicted everything your soulmate had been told. Your soulmate stepped closer and asked exactly what they had seen. The person hesitated, glanced toward everyone else, and finally said, "They cared about you more than you ever realized." Your soulmate's eyes widened. Suddenly, screaming their love in front of everyone wasn't the boldest thing that happened that night. Because the next detail revealed exactly what you had quietly done for them when you believed nobody was watching. What your soulmate heard next completely changed the way they remembered the past. The person admitted there had been a moment when you could have exposed something embarrassing about your soulmate, defended yourself publicly, and made everyone understand your side. But you didn't. Instead, you quietly protected their dignity, even though staying silent made you look like the one who didn't care. Your soulmate stared in disbelief. They had spent months thinking your silence meant distance, when it may have meant the exact opposite. And suddenly one painful question escaped them: "Why didn't anyone tell me this before?" Nobody answered immediately. That silence told your soulmate enough. They began connecting moments that had never made sense. The mixed messages, the sudden changes in people's behavior, the strange warnings whenever they considered contacting you. Then someone admitted that your quiet loyalty had frightened them because it proved your connection wasn't as one-sided as they had claimed. Your soulmate's anger disappeared for a second and became something deeper: regret. They realized you might have been waiting for one honest sign while they were being convinced to stay away. But then another person interrupted with information nobody expected: you weren't the only one who had been keeping something private. Your soulmate lowered their voice and finally confessed what they had hidden from everyone in that room. They had almost reached out to you several times. One message had even been written completely, with everything they had never dared to say: the love, the fear, the regret, and the truth about why they disappeared. But they deleted it before sending. Now, after screaming their love publicly and discovering what had really happened, they no longer wanted fear making their decisions. They reached for their phone right there in front of everyone. Yet before they could unlock the screen, someone suddenly said, "Wait. Before you contact them, there's one more thing you need to know." Your soulmate stopped with the phone still in their hand. The person who had spoken looked nervous, as though revealing this final detail could change everything. Then came the truth. Someone had recently heard you mention your soulmate, and what you said was nothing like the cold, distant version everyone had described. You hadn't spoken with bitterness. You hadn't dismissed what happened between you. Instead, you had quietly admitted that part of you still wondered whether your soulmate ever understood how much the connection meant. Hearing that, your soulmate's expression changed instantly. For the first time that night, their anger gave way to hope. But hope brought an even more frightening question. Had they waited so long that you were already preparing to close the door? That possibility made everything suddenly urgent. Your soulmate began pacing, replaying every opportunity they had missed. They remembered the times they almost told you the truth, only to convince themselves there would always be another chance. But now there was no guarantee. Someone suggested they wait until emotions settled before contacting you. Your soulmate immediately shook their head. Waiting is what created this mess, they said. The room fell silent again because everyone could hear the difference in their voice. This wasn't the frightened person they had been advising for months. Something had shifted. Your soulmate opened their phone and pulled up your name, but instead of typing another message they might delete, they made an unexpected decision. They decided that words on a screen were no longer enough. After publicly admitting their love, sending a careful little message felt almost dishonest. Your soulmate wanted you to hear their voice and understand that this time there would be no hiding. But just as they prepared to call, one person quietly approached and handed them something they hadn't expected to see. It was connected to you, something that had been kept away from them because someone believed seeing it would make your soulmate run straight toward you. Their hands began trembling again as they looked down at it. And before anyone could explain, your soulmate whispered, "You had this the entire time?" Your soulmate couldn't take their eyes off what had been placed in their hands. It was a small note containing words you had once shared about them, words that were never supposed to become evidence in someone else's argument. You had described your soulmate as someone you still cared about despite the confusion between you, someone you never wanted to see hurt. Nothing dramatic. Nothing desperate. Just honest affection. And somehow, that made it more powerful. Your soulmate read the lines twice, then a third time, realizing that while they had been told you were moving on without a second thought, you had been carrying your own unanswered feelings. Their voice cracked as they asked, "How long have you known about this?" The answer made the room uncomfortable. Long enough. Someone had discovered those words earlier but decided your soulmate shouldn't hear them because they were already struggling to detach from you. They believed withholding the truth would make everything easier. Instead, it had created months of unnecessary distance. Your soulmate looked around at everyone who had witnessed their public confession and finally understood something painful. Other people's fears had been louder than their own heart. But that was finished now. They folded the note carefully and placed it in their pocket. Then they looked at your name glowing on their phone screen. Stay till the end, because what they chose to do next surprised even the person who had finally revealed the truth. Your soulmate didn't call you, not yet. Instead, they walked toward the door. Someone asked where they were going, and without turning around, they answered, "I'm done letting other people speak for me." The room erupted with questions, but your soulmate kept moving. Their plan was suddenly clear. They wanted to tell you everything directly, without another person interpreting their feelings or deciding what you deserve to know. But just before they reached the door, their phone vibrated. They stopped. Everyone watched as they slowly looked down at the screen, and the expression on their face changed instantly. Because after all those months of hesitation, your name had appeared with a message they never expected to receive that night. For several seconds, your soulmate simply stared at your name. The timing felt impossible. They had just confessed their love in front of everyone, uncovered months of interference, and decided they were finally going to find you. And now you had reached out first. Their thumb hovered over the message while everyone behind them waited. When they finally opened it, the words were simple: you had been thinking about them and felt there was something unfinished between you. Your soulmate's eyes filled instantly. But one sentence near the bottom made them stop completely. You asked whether they had ever wanted to tell you something but had been too afraid to say it. That question struck directly at everything they had been hiding. Your soulmate looked back at the room, almost stunned by how perfectly your message matched what had happened. Someone whispered that maybe they should calm down before responding, but your soulmate shook their head. They had spent too long editing their feelings into silence. This time, they began typing exactly what was true. That they had cared far more deeply than they ever showed, that fear and outside voices had confused them, and that tonight they finally stopped pretending. Then they paused. Telling you they loved you through a message suddenly felt too small after screaming those same words before an entire room. So they erased the draft and pressed something else instead. They called you. The room became completely silent as the phone rang once, twice, then stopped. Your soulmate's face fell for half a second, thinking the call had been rejected. But then the screen changed, you were calling them back. Their hands trembled as they answered and quietly said your name. Before they could explain anything, you spoke first, asking a question that left them speechless: did something happen tonight? I suddenly felt like I needed to reach you. Your soulmate looked around at everyone who had witnessed the confession, then took a slow breath. They were finally ready to tell you everything. But before they could begin, someone behind them suddenly rushed forward with one last secret about why this night had unfolded exactly when it did. The person rushing forward wasn't trying to stop your soulmate anymore. They were trying to correct something before another misunderstanding could survive the night. In a trembling voice, they admitted that earlier that same day, someone had told them you might finally be ready to walk away from the connection, not because your feelings had disappeared, but because the uncertainty had become too painful. That news had traveled through the room before your soulmate arrived, and suddenly everything made sense. The strange tension. The pointed questions. The pressure about forgetting you. Your soulmate tightened their grip on the phone as they realized their public confession hadn't happened randomly. Deep down, they had sensed they were running out of time. And now you were on the other end of the call, waiting for the truth they had delayed for far too long. Your soulmate stepped outside where nobody could interrupt. Their voice softened. Yes, something happened tonight, they told you. Then they finally explained the part that mattered most. When people questioned what you meant to them, something inside them refused to stay silent anymore. They admitted they had stood in front of everyone and declared their love for you without planning a single word. You became quiet. So quiet that your soulmate wondered whether they had overwhelmed you. Then you asked, "Why tonight?" That question forced them deeper. They told you about the doubts planted around them, the information withheld, and the painful realization that fear had been making decisions neither of you truly wanted. But they didn't blame everyone else. They admitted their own mistake too. They should have trusted what they felt enough to speak sooner. Then came the silence your soulmate feared most. For several seconds, neither of you spoke. They could hear their own heartbeat while waiting for your response. Finally, you said something they hadn't prepared themselves to hear. You had almost decided that very night to stop waiting for clarity. Your soulmate closed their eyes, realizing how close they had come to losing the opportunity completely. But you weren't finished. You explained that before making that decision, you wanted one final honest conversation, and that was why you had sent the message. Your soulmate whispered, "Then maybe neither of us reached out too late." And just when the tension began turning into relief, you revealed there was one question you needed answered before you could believe this connection still had a real chance. Your question was simple, but it carried the weight of everything that had happened. If nobody had pushed you tonight, would you still have chosen me? Your soulmate went completely silent. They understood what you were really asking. You didn't want love created by panic, jealousy, or the fear of losing you. You needed to know whether their feelings existed before the room went silent and before everyone heard them scream those unforgettable words. Your soulmate took a breath and answered without hesitation. "I didn't fall in love with you tonight. Tonight was just the first time I stopped hiding it." Then they revealed something nobody else knew. They had been keeping reminders of you for months because letting go had never felt honest. They told you about the unsent messages, the moments they almost called, and the countless times they wondered whether you were thinking about them too. But this time, they refused to make promises built only on emotion. They said they wanted to prove their feelings through consistency, honesty, and actions you could actually trust. Your voice softened, yet you asked another difficult question: what happens when those people disagree again? Your soulmate looked through the window at everyone still waiting inside and finally understood the real test. Loving you publicly was dramatic. Choosing you calmly tomorrow, next week, and when nobody was watching would mean far more. "They can have their opinions," your soulmate said. "But they don't get to make this decision for me anymore." That answer changed the entire conversation. You didn't immediately promise them everything would become perfect, and strangely, your soulmate respected that. Instead, you agreed that there was too much truth between you to leave buried beneath assumptions. You needed to speak face to face. Your soulmate smiled for the first time that night and asked when. There was another brief silence before you gave an answer that made them look back toward the room in disbelief. You weren't asking them to wait days or weeks. You were closer than they realized, and you were willing to meet much sooner. Your soulmate's heart started racing again because the public confession everyone thought was the biggest moment of the night was about to lead to something far more personal, and neither of you knew what would happen when you finally stood face to face. Your soulmate didn't waste another minute. They quietly told everyone inside that they were leaving, but this time nobody tried to stop them. The same people who had watched them scream their love now watched them walk away with an entirely different energy, calmer, clearer, almost relieved. Yet underneath that confidence was real fear. What if seeing you face to face brought back every unanswered question? What if the months of distance had changed too much? On the way, your soulmate kept replaying your voice, especially the moment you said you were willing to meet. Then another thought hit them. You hadn't asked FO.